US President Donald Trump is trying to get American allies to help lift Iran's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran blocked the critical waterway after the US and Israel attacked the country.
The Strait of Hormuz has suddenly returned to the center of global attention, and the reason is simple. This narrow stretch of water between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula carries an enormous portion of the world's energy supply. Tankers carrying crude oil and liquefied natural gas pass through it every day on their way to markets across Asia, Europe, and North America. When political tension rises in this region, the consequences rarely stay local. They move outward through energy prices, shipping costs, insurance markets, and eventually into the daily expenses faced by millions of people around the world. In recent statements, President Donald Trump addressed the situation by emphasizing that countries benefiting from the oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz should help protect that passage. His message highlighted the importance of cooperation among nations that rely on the waterway, while also stressing that the United States would continue playing a major role in keeping it secure. The remarks came during a period of rising tension involving Iran, regional security concerns, and increased military presence near the Gulf. What makes the situation significant is not just the political messaging surrounding it, but the reality of how sensitive the Strait of Hormuz has always been.
The Strait of Hormuz has effectively been closed to most shipping since the US and Israel attacked Iran, sending energy prices soaring worldwide.
The channel itself is relatively narrow, yet it functions as one of the most important transportation corridors on the planet. The ripple effects move quickly into oil prices, global shipping routes, and the cost of energy that businesses and households rely on every single day. YouTube isn't the biggest fan of content like this, but we believe the truth matters. If you agree, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us beat the algorithm and keep pushing forward. We really appreciate the support. To understand why leaders around the world are watching the Strait of Hormuz so closely right now, it helps to look at the larger pattern of events that brought it back into focus. For months, tensions involving Iran, regional military activity, and diplomatic disagreements have been building quietly in the background. The Gulf region has always been strategically important, but when military deployments increase and political rhetoric intensifies at the same time, governments and markets begin paying attention very quickly. The Strait of Hormuz is often described as a choke point, and that description is accurate. At its narrowest point, the shipping lanes used by commercial tankers pass through a corridor that sits between Iran on one side and Gulf states such as Oman and the United Arab Emirates on the other.
New strikes across Tehran tonight as the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran is expanding, systematically destroying Iran's military, blowing up its missiles, and killing its leaders.
Every vessel moving through those lanes is effectively traveling through one of the most closely monitored maritime zones in the world. Radar systems, naval patrols, and surveillance aircraft constantly track activity in the area because any disruption could affect the global economy within days. That is why statements about protecting the strait carry such weight. Maintaining open shipping lanes has long been considered a shared interest among many nations, particularly those whose economies depend heavily on energy imports. When leaders talk about cooperation in this region, they are usually referring to the idea that multiple countries contribute naval assets, intelligence, and logistical support to ensure commercial shipping continues moving safely. At the same time, the situation surrounding Iran adds another layer of complexity. Iran has historically viewed the Strait of Hormuz as an important strategic lever, especially during periods of confrontation with Western governments.
Worst case would be we do this and then somebody takes over who's as bad as the previous person. Right? Most of the people we had in mind are dead. So, we had some in mind from that group that is dead.
Iranian military doctrine has often emphasized the country's ability to disrupt shipping if conflict escalates. This does not necessarily mean the strait will close, but it explains why tensions involving Iran immediately draw global attention whenever the issue surfaces. The reaction from other countries has also been closely watched. European governments, Gulf states, and international shipping organizations have all been studying the situation carefully. In moments like this, allies and regional partners often balance several competing priorities at once. They want stability in the region, they want energy markets to remain predictable, and they want to avoid escalation that could turn a localized crisis into a much larger confrontation. This balancing act is part of how modern international security works. Military power still matters, but so do diplomacy, economic relationships, and long-standing alliances. When a sensitive location like the Strait of Hormuz becomes the center of attention, every government involved begins calculating its next steps carefully.
In particular, but we have been approached by a number of countries who wants to have a safe passage for their vessels, and this is up to our military to decide.
Naval deployments, public statements, and diplomatic messages all become part of a broader strategy aimed at maintaining stability while protecting national interests. Traders know that even the possibility of disruption can move prices quickly. Oil markets are extremely sensitive to geopolitical developments in the Gulf because such a large percentage of global supply travels through that corridor. When investors believe there is increased risk, prices often climb as markets attempt to account for potential supply interruptions. Those price movements do not remain confined to financial markets for long. Higher energy costs eventually filter into transportation, manufacturing, and agriculture. Airlines pay more for fuel, shipping companies adjust freight rates, and businesses facing higher logistics costs often pass those increases along to consumers. In other words, the strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz eventually becomes visible in everyday economic realities, such as gasoline prices or the cost of goods on store shelves.
See it really getting reopened is a regime change in Iran, which is probably not happening, at least in the near future.
Another factor shaping the current situation is the role of alliances and international cooperation. Many of the countries that rely on energy shipments through the Gulf have historically supported maritime security efforts designed to keep trade routes open. These efforts often involve joint naval patrols, intelligence sharing, and coordination between multiple governments. The idea behind these arrangements is simple. Protecting global trade routes is easier when responsibility is shared. At the same time, the geopolitical landscape has become more complex in recent years. New economic partnerships, shifting diplomatic relationships, and regional rivalries have all influenced how countries respond to crises. Governments now evaluate risks not only through military calculations, but also through trade relationships, domestic politics, and long-term economic planning. For that reason, the conversation around the Strait of Hormuz is about more than a single statement or a single political moment. It reflects a broader question about how international systems respond when strategic choke points come under pressure. Some countries prioritize military readiness, others emphasize diplomacy, and many attempt to balance both approaches at the same time. Looking ahead, several possible paths could emerge. One scenario involves increased coordination among countries that rely on the strait, reinforcing maritime security while avoiding direct confrontation. Another possibility is a prolonged period of tension where naval forces remain present, but the situation stops short of escalation. A third scenario, which many policymakers hope to avoid, would involve incidents at sea that trigger a wider regional crisis. For now, commercial shipping continues to move through the Strait of Hormuz, and global markets remain highly sensitive to every development in the region. The next moves by governments, military planners, and diplomatic channels will determine whether the situation stabilizes or becomes another chapter in the long history of geopolitical tension surrounding the Persian Gulf. What happens next will not only shape the security environment in the Middle East, but also influence the broader global economy. When a strategic waterway like the Strait of Hormuz becomes the focus of international attention, the effects rarely stay confined to one region. They move outward, touching energy markets, international trade, and the financial systems that connect economies across the world. For now, the strait remains open. Naval forces remain on alert, and governments continue watching each other closely. The balance between deterrence and escalation has always been delicate in this region, and the coming weeks will likely determine whether this moment becomes a short-term tension or the beginning of something much larger. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.